Hello, everybody. This is a special episode, really, of the Big Home Ed Conversations. I asked Wendy over Christmas from Education Otherwise to come back and chat to us for one or maybe more special episodes about the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill. That's obviously top subject in all of our heads right now. One of the things we were literally just talking about before we got on is how anxious it can make us all feel when we're facing a fight again, when we know that we've not long fought one. And it kind of feels a little bit like we are always fighting for what feels like really should be quite a simple right as a human being to be with your children and to raise your children. It feels like we are definitely fighting again for something which feels like it should really just be an intrinsic part of our life, that we should be allowed to choose how we spend our time, so to speak. And I think so many of us are feeling quite anxious right now that we're about to have certain privileges or rights or experiences stripped away, and actually ultimately we're saying that it's not anywhere close to being in law yet. They've got a heck of a lot of work still to do before we reach that stage as well, really, and that we're already fighting and pushing back and doing the right things. So I think first and foremost, kind of should we be worried, Wendy? Is this something that we should be sitting here quaking in our boots about, thinking that everything is going to tumble down around us? I certainly don't think we're quite there yet, are we?
We're certainly not there yet. I think the most important message that parents need to understand is please do not panic. There are people and groups online trying to whip up that panic. We have seen groups and individuals online whipping up panic, but panic is not going to help, and it's also not warranted at this stage. Firstly, we have a long way to go before this is law. We have got MPs in Parliament who are on side. 111 votes for amendments were made only the other day in the second debate. And every single parent can help and work to make this change for themselves. If you think about it, people often think, well, I don't matter, I'm just an individual. But if every single house brick was treated as just an individual, you'd never build a house. Every single one of those bricks actually is crucial to the building of that house. And it's exactly the same thing. Every parent who writes to their MP is contributing. If their children do as well, think about it. There are roughly 120,000 home-educated children. That's roughly 80,000 parents. That's 200,000 communications. If every one of those writes to their MP and asks a friend to do so, that's 480,000. You're constantly adding the figures.
Yeah.
The more pressure we put, and it's not just children who are home educated. School friends could have the same. There are aspects of this bill that can affect school children too. It will affect the ability, for example, of academies to provide a broad and balanced education. Many of us do not feel that the national curriculum is up to what it should be, and yet be forced to follow it. So ask your friends whose children are in school to also contact their MP. There are things also going on. Please do. Education Otherwise Facebook group, we posted our discussions about this, which go into length about all of the actions we're taking and what you can do. So please go there, please join the Facebook group and just watch through the video sessions for as much advice as we can give you. But in the meantime, we are and have obtained advice from Senior Counsel David Wolf KC. David is drafting arguments. He is confident that there are aspects of this bill that could be legally challenged. Many of the things that we are worried about actually aren't legal challenges. They're more moral challenges. But there are actually legal challenges. And as soon as we've got those arguments drafted, we will be sharing them on the group. So you can use that to inform what you say to your MP. So now, it's not about panicking. It's about empowering yourself. It's about saying, I have a voice and I am going to use it. If your writes back to you and says, as I saw one this week, oh no, this is really important because Sarah Sharif life would have been saved, tell them why they're wrong.
Ask them to consider another perspective.
Yes.
Yeah.
explain to them why they're wrong. In that particular case, for example, Sarah Sharif had been known to Children's Services since before she was born. A family court judge put her into the care of her abusive father, despite having been the same judge who found him guilty of abuse. And social services had 16 referrals that they didn't act on. And capital on the cake, she died during the school holidays when every child wouldn't have had oversight by a school in any way. So it's just nonsense to say that this bill would have protected her. There are challenges you can make, so do come join me in the discussion. We will, we will upload information as soon as we've got it.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important for us to kind of really reassure ourselves that at the end of the day, where we maybe don't understand the full ins and outs of this bill, like myself, if I was to sit and read it and be like, holy moly, like I don't even know what I'm looking at half the time. And we can come at it from a state of feeling really kind of like it's out of our hands. And as you say, it takes more than a brick to build a house. We all need to put our 2 pennies worth in. It's okay if yours is a bit rough around the edges. It doesn't have to be in legal jargon. Your MP is going to be responding to you as a person, and your experience matters. Like whether it's your child's experience, whether it's your experience in school environment, whether you've been a teacher, whether you've left recently because of things that you've seen that you feel weren't safeguarding children or weren't actually providing a good environment for them. That there's so many different arguments to be making in trying to emphasize that. Because I think there's one quote in particular, I'm going to tell you now, I can't remember who it was who said it now. One of the MPs was basically stating on the lines of that children, or insinuating was the word, that children would be better off in school and that they can be provided a better safeguarded experience inside of school walls and would have a better education. And that kind of sweeping, I don't know, it makes me wonder if they attended a standard school themselves. I imagine not, but it makes you wonder really like where they get these ideas from, that they've got these ideas fixed in their heads that every child, no matter what situation they're in, no matter kind of the values that family hold or abilities that child holds or passions and intentions for their own future they might have, that they are 100% better safeguarded inside school walls. And I think so many of us can attest to the experience that we maybe had in school if we went, and possibly that our children have been forced to endure, that actually that wasn't the case, that they were not safe, whether that's literally physically, like when we talk about bullying and kind of punishments, being asked to not use the toilet, being asked to not have drinks available to them, whatever it might be. Like these in themselves potentially make children unsafe in my opinion, but also just the emotional, the strain, the mental health that our children are experiencing in schools. Like we don't need to necessarily get into that in great depth, but we know that the truth is that children are not always better safeguarded in schools. And I get that what they're saying is they want to have this linked up, everybody is talking to everybody. If someone's seeing something, they're saying it, and it's all being documented and supported. Like, I get it, I do. They want to bring it all together and make it so that we're all kind of talking to each other. And I do agree that that should be, in this current digital age, so simple. Like it should be so simple that when a child is getting a red flag in a hospital because they've been in 3 times in the past week with significant injuries, that sure, that does need to be connected to this department, who also needs to connect it to this department. Of course it does. But we can't be saying that just because a child is home educated that they're invisible or suddenly not being safeguarded at all. Like my children are registered with a GP. We are registered with our local council. We have been to the hospital for injuries and told them that they are home educated. Like we're not hiding them. We're not like putting them under a rock somewhere. Like when things happen, people know about it. And at the end of the day, we have this sort of weird assumption, don't we, that some people, MP wise, do seem to be having these strange assumptions that children will just be better off that way. And that is definitely something that I commented on in my letter to my MP recently, and will probably write to them again as more things develop. Ultimately, kind of just saying you need to really think about the perspectives here, really think about these sort of moments when they say these things and you feel like they're just a fact, but that isn't a fact. Like that you've got to think about the other perspectives because it is important. But yeah, go on. We'd love some facts. Always love a fact.
Okay. Children get a better education in school. Did you know that 10% of schools are either in special measures or found to be inadequate by Ofsted? 10% of the schools inspected by Ofsted are found to be inadequate or in special measures.
It makes you wonder how many children that is. Just the quantity of children that must be.
Thousands of them. 10% of Ofsted inspected schools. So what percentage of home educated children are found to be failing to provide a suitable education? Well, actually, in the last year, for which figures are available, and these are all government statistics, 1.4% were found to not be providing a suitable education and subject to a school attendance order and found guilty. 1.4% home educated, 10% in school. That's the data. Let's look at safeguarding. Home educated children are twice as likely to be referred to children's social services as school-based children are. And if you look at the conversion rate from referral to child protection plan, it's 26% in school children, 11% in home educated. If you actually look at the percentage of children subject to a child protection plan, home educated and school, there's 0.1% difference. So what that says is that it's 4.56% or something over all of those referred. I have the data, but anyway, basically, those children in school, the data shows us that the percentage subject to a child protection plan is virtually identical to the percentage home educated, despite twice as many home educated children being assessed. So we know that school does not protect children. And here's the really shocking government statistic. This is actually a little bit old now, because it was a piece of research commissioned by the government. It was a company analysed references and referrals for abuse and poor behaviour by teachers and teaching staff. And the purpose of the research was try to ascertain whether the teaching staff were subjected to unwarranted investigation. And what that found was that the percentage, compared to our statistic, the percentage of teaching staff in schools found guilty of abusing children is slightly higher than the percentage of home educated children subject to a child protection plan. That's quite shocking.
And I think what is shocking as well, like you think, I guess I want to ask the questions like, why are so many children being referred to social services if they are home educated? That to me, I know that there are malicious referrals made by schools simply as they are deregistering, that schools are just referring them to social services because they just disagree with the decision and that they just don't want the child to be deregistered. But I think the truth is that I know I have a friend who had a malicious referral made by a family member who just disagreed with the idea of her home educating her children, which is awful to imagine a family member doing something like that. But like, we're talking families here who are perfectly normal, perfectly capable, wonderful to their children, who are getting on the radar of social services. And under this new bill, I understand that would actually mean that they would, as soon as that has been the case, that could potentially start to cause trouble for them, and they might not then be able to home educate simply because of this sort of malicious referral, etc. So it's completely unacceptable. As you said, I think in one of the messages we've had back and forth is like, absolutely, or maybe it's on something I read, but they're saying about absolutely, if a child is on a child protective plan, then I don't think I disagree with the idea that child, they should be taking a good hard look as to whether or not that child should be allowed to be then home educated and not have access to a school education, which, let's be honest, could in that situation mean that child would not be receiving an education at all. And so, yes, I agree there should be very much questions asked in that situation. But a child who simply had an investigation at some point that could have been a nonsense referral that got completely dismissed and thrown out, that is not someone who should have to jump through any extra hoops to do something that they feel is actually safeguarding their child. They might be doing what they probably will be doing absolutely the right thing for their child in doing that. So it makes no sense, does it?
Exactly. Of those children referred to social services who are subject to a Children Act Section 47 investigation, 8% do not end up on a child protection plan. So 78% of those children who would be subject to what is essentially a formal notice to satisfy, which is to a school attendance order, 78% would be subject to it for no good reason. And let me give you an example. And I just sent some what we call walkthroughs. So I've taken actual cases I'm dealing with, anonymised them, and walked through the bill to see what would happen to that family. and I've sent them to the senior DfE officers that we're actually meeting with over this. And this
Yeah.
particular case, I'll give you an outline. I'll keep it so that it retains confidentiality. Domestic abuse situation. The father has had very, very little relationship with the child. The father actually only first met the child when he was about 5. He's seen him only 2 or 3 times in his life. The child has severe autism and other needs. A psychologist, an expert, has found that that child could not cope with school and needs to be home educated. So, in the past 2 years, of which the parent is aware, 17 separate referrals have been made to Children's Social Services, making serious allegations about the mother and isolating the child, abusing the child, and having mental health problems. These are common. I'm actually a family lawyer, and a lot of my cases are domestic abuse cases. And I can almost tell you what the average abusive parent will say, and it always includes isolating, neglecting, and the mother has mental health difficulties or the father has mental health difficulties. Of those 17 referrals, 14 resulted in Section 47 investigations, every single one of which was closed with no child protection plan. The final three, the mother had moved, and the court and the social worker actually understood what was going on and treated them as malicious. So 14 times in the space of a couple of years, that mother was being subjected to a notice to satisfy, to prove to the satisfaction of the local authority that her home education was suitable. But it's even more sinister than that, because if a parent is in court proceedings, as this parent was, and social services are actually investigating serious allegations, courts have conservative cases. So what could have happened had there not been a psychologist report? If that mother had been in an average case where no psychologist report had been obtained, the court would have acted conservatively and said, well, we better make an interim order putting this child in school. Bear in mind, this is a child with such complex needs that he was suicidal in school. So by extending this, I don't think any reasonable person can object to somebody who's on a child protection plan for good reason being subject to having to provide evidence and prove that education is suitable for the child. But if you extend that to those who are just under investigation, you open it up to every malicious and misguided individual. They're not always malicious. You think about it. I've seen many, many cases where an elderly neighbour who doesn't even know that home education exists rings social services and says, oh, I'm really concerned because my neighbour's children are outside playing in the street at all hours of the day and they don't even have their coats on. Now, when I was a child, it was schools insisted that children wore full coats at playtime during certain terms of the year. Regardless of the weather, we were told we could wear coats. And that lady would have grown up in that sort of culture. And so to her, oh, the child's not wearing a coat and the child's outside is a genuine concern. It's not malicious, but that will result in a social services investigation. You then have the fact
it just seems crazy to me. Like, in all seriousness, I mean, getting my kids to wear coats is like, honestly, it's like trying to put a coat on a slippery pig. Like, you're never going to manage it. You're going to race around for the rest of your life. Like, they'll wear them if they're really cold, but they won't put them on unless they really want to. It's crazy, isn't it? That to me is just mind-boggling.
Yeah. We have a 5-year-old who's exactly the same. But you then take it one step further. Social workers used to, in their training, in their guidance, they're given lists of what are risk factors. And one risk factor used to be the child was not in education. Now, about 4 or 5 years ago, that was changed to the child was not in school. So the social worker comes along and she says, I'm sorry, we've had this referral that your children are outside all day and they're not wearing coats. And the parent says, no, that's fine. You know, they're home educated. That's why they're at different times.
Yeah.
Right. Big light bulb moment for social worker, tick the box. not in school. That means
Mm-hmm.
factor. So the chance of
God's
that
sake.
parent being subjected to a Section 47 investigation is extrapolated. It becomes
For goodness
worse.
sake.
And it's not necessarily about malice, but where you have malice, and I dealt with a case only last week or the week before, it was very, very recent, where the parent had had an argument with somebody who has a professional role that involves safeguarding. The argument was basically about they were in a meeting together and the individual wanted to go to one particular place and the other individual wanted to go to another. And it was only a group of friends meeting up. You know, it was nothing important. But the person, the professional individual, not the one who was just the mum, was very angry because she really, really didn't like being disagreed with. And she made a referral to Children's Social Services making claims about the other mother. That mother had a social worker turn up on her door. She has got 3 or 4 children, I can't remember how many, one of whom is so severely disabled that a social worker turning up at the door caused that child to become so dysregulated that the social worker then had to help mum to comfort the child. Now, fortunately, she had evidence that it was malicious, but how many people do? And I see this commonly in domestic abuse cases, and I deal with quite a few domestic abuse cases every year. And these are cases where the abusive parent doesn't care about the child. That very often, their only goal is to hurt the parent caring for the child. And locally to me, I have a case where actually the father is the parent with care of the children, and the mother has very serious problems. And this father has spent nearly 11 years being consistently referred to Children's Social Services and taken to court. And
it's just unbelievable, isn't it? But I think what's really kind of, I guess, it's going to be worrying people, I guess, is this, I mean, certainly a thought that crossed my mind is that under this bill, it would also give the government an opportunity to simply, or schools or GP surgeries or whoever, to be given policies where they hear a child is home educated and to just automatically refer for like investigation, like a child turns up at the hospital with a broken arm, oh, they're also home educated. In that case, they've ticked 2 risk factors. Now we automatically get a referral. And then obviously we're going to end up with a severe number of children who are completely fine, completely safe, going on to the investigative side of things, which means that so many more parents are then going to be so stressed about actually providing a good education for their children. I think what the government needs to recognise is the increase in people pulling their children from school is largely being caused by inconsistent, unsafe, like miserable experience of their children in school, and obviously the fears that they are suicidal or whatever really that might be going on for them, and that parents are choosing to do something different for their children and care about them more than anybody else on the planet does in 99% of cases, and ultimately are desperately wanting to make sure that they are safeguarding their children way better than any stranger ever could. And I think what is really quite frustrating about this is this idea that parents who are home educating instantly having that as a risk factor. But it's just like, what's, like, if we're really truthfully, like, if we just take a step back and think about that for a minute, what exactly about it is so risky? Just the fact that they're not being in a school with a teacher looking after 30 children. Like, what is so risky about that? And I did say in my letter to my MP, I just want you to really understand how not hidden these children are. That you think that one adult to 30 children, if that is the pinnacle of safeguarding and paying attention to children, if that is what we're looking for, then ultimately I want you to think about how many people my children will interact with on a daily basis, just going about our day, living our life, that yes, okay, we don't necessarily go out every day, but we still have the postman knock on the front door every day and the children run to the door to get whatever post he's got. We've still got people we walk the dog with almost every day that know them, that talk to them. We have street parties, we know our neighbours. Like, we see family, we talk on video calls to family. There are so many moments when our children are seen. And I think that children who are in school and are being abused at home, the truth of the matter is, schools are missing that
Right.
most of the time. If you're really talking about a child, so say, for example, I was abusing my children, like, how sure am I that in all the people who see them and meet them on a daily basis would know about it? Like, it's just one of those things, like, you would know, you would see it, you would hear me, you'd interact with me, you'd see that. I don't know. I feel like I just don't see how it makes any difference. These children are going home. They're in school for what, 30 hours a week?
Yeah.
And then they're home. So, I mean, that's literally just over a day of the week. So that means most of their week, they are still in the care of the people who are abusing them. And so ultimately, it doesn't make any difference.
And you look at it, we're not seeking register and compulsory meetings of any sort. We're not seeking oversight of children under 5. Children
No.
yes, there's a health visitor service, but it's not mandatory. What about children during the school holiday? Do they suddenly not need safeguarding? So the 6-week main school holiday, if you're an independent school, that could be longer than 6 weeks. It can be up to 7.5, 8. So those children are only safe when they're in school. So why aren't mandating school holiday registers and compulsory check? This is the thing. It flies in the face of logic. And actually, you saying about how many people your children meet brings me to another aspect of this bill, which I think we can talk about. Parents can talk about examples in their own lives. I have a friend who She home educated 8 children. 2 of them have now moved on to higher education. Both of them doing very well. So she's got 6 children who are home educated currently. And I said, well, right, okay, you've got to tell the local authority about every single education provider. And as the bill stands, they don't define what that is. So that's anyone providing education to your child. And she said, well, mine are nearly all classes and tutors. Let me add them up. 64. She had 64 different providers. And I said, well, hang on. How often do those change? Because you've got to notify changes within 15 days. And she said, probably about 10 a week. Because online things, they switch them out. Each child might change 1 or 2 a week. So she said, probably about a week. So she's got to report these within 15 days. So she's got an initial burden of 64 sets of data to provide, followed by every single week she's got to provide another 10 changes. Add to that, she's self-employed. And so very often her mum will spend time with the children while they're undertaking their education, supervising them. So she's got to provide the local authority with the hours that each parent is looking after the children. Now, these children actually only have one parent, but she's got to provide those hours. So every single week, she's got to, in fact, every day or fortnightly, she's got to do a day-by-day, blow-by-blow account, every single change in those hours. So
this is exactly the problem that's been going on in schools for the past decade or more. It was just the constant addition of paperwork. Like, I know that my mum, who worked in a nursery, was just constantly frustrated by just the red tape, the constant forms, they're filling out all the planning, they're filling out all of what they've done every day, filling out all their individual books. Like, it's just, she goes, it just took forever. And so you actually didn't get much time to physically play with the children or enjoy the children or actually help them to be nourished and growing, having a great time. And I think I know that schools are crippled by this and lots of teachers are leaving because of this as well, that ultimately, why should a parent who is desperately trying to keep the economy going and their own life, like desperately doing everything they've got to do in their own home, like they've got to cook, clean, take care of their kids, work, and actually educate them, like just speaking from personal experience, like we are fairly strained as it is in the current climate that we're in, that do they really want thousands of parents who currently home educate, or hundreds of parents, whatever, to basically sit there and go, actually, do you know what, fine, they're just going to have to go back into school because I can't keep up with this silly paperwork. That's not good for the child who has clearly been safeguarded by bringing them out of school and home educating them, and they're then going to be put back into a situation where they're not okay and they're not happy, and now the schools have got even more children to try and satisfy the needs of. But ultimately, it makes no sense.
With the best will in the world, no matter how good a teacher is, how much individual attention can they give to each of 30 children in their class? How much? They've got, you go to senior school and you've got 30-minute or 1 hour lessons. How much attention can each child? So in a 1 hour, even if no child is disruptive, even if the teacher was able to give exactly the same amount of attention to each child, that's 2 minutes. 2 minutes an hour. What is a parent doing? You're giving 50 minutes in an hour. But I don't want parents to feel that they've got to panic about this. I think what we're doing is talking about the sort of things that are happening and how you can take a walk through your own life and explain to your MP how this will affect you. I think a really, really important message to MPs is about the primacy of the parent. The Education Act 1996, Section 7, says that it is the duty of every parent to ensure that their child receives suitable education. Now, you can do that by sending your child to school, or you can do it by home educating them. But it is always the duty of the parent. So now we have a bill that is saying that if you home educate, or if you want to home educate and you want to withdraw your child from school, in certain circumstances, the local authority can decide whether or not that would be in your child's best interest. If you already home educate and you're referred to children's services and they decide to investigate, the local authority can decide whether the education is in your child's best interest. So basically, you can have a situation like my friend I just referred to, whose home education is so great that a local authority holds itself as an example of excellence. So home education is excellent, but a social worker who decides, no, you can't possibly be educating this many children well, it's not in their best interest. And receiving an excellent education could then be put into a state school through school attendance because somebody who does not know them decides it's not in their best interest. Now, if we look at that, the best interest of the child is always the duty of the parent to act in the best interests of the child. Who decides the best interests of the child is always the parent, unless there is a court order in place. So, for example, a care order for the child. Now, if parents disagree about what's in the best interest of the child, the aggrieved parent has to make an application to the court. Then, and only then, does somebody other than the parent decide what's in the best interest of the child. But here we have a bill that's saying, oh no, we've decided that the state should take the parenting role. Now, MPs, very often MPs, now Labour parties are subject to Labour whip and they vote in favour of the bill. Now, other MPs might be more open to understanding. Even Labour MPs might understand that it needs some adjustment. That actually, the big message for most MPs who are not in the Labour Party, the big message is the primacy of the parent and undermining the parent and giving them state control over children's lives. So the state does not make a good parent.
No.
In care do not have happy outcomes. It's only in your argument that you as the parent feel that your parental right to act in the best interests of your children are being undermined, and the state is not a good parent or a good decision maker. It's a good thing to raise. So take that walk through your life. I mean, if I looked at my life, goodness, I can think of one example. I'll give you a lovely one, which is totally mad. I was home educating my grandson a few years back now, and he was terribly interested in forensic sciences for a short period. So he wanted to understand about blood splatter analysis, and there are worse examples that are really bizarre. So,
oh, I've got to love a home-educated kid. Some of the stuff they ask for.
Pig's head from the butcher, because pigs are similar to human beings in their structure, injected it with red fluid, put it on a large white cloth next to a white wall, gave him a hammer, and told him to sit in different places and bash Pig's head, blood spatter all over the place. Can you imagine?
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine a social worker turning up, and there we are, eating the hell out of Pig's head and covered in blood, but what she was in as blood, and measuring the blood spatter analysis. Oh,
Yeah.
goodness me, can you just imagine? You know, would they have thought that home
It's,
education was in his best interest?
but this is the thing. It's a whole other perspective, and this is where the idea of perspective really comes in, I think, and what I really emphasise to my MP is you've got to get into the heads of a different way of being. Like, I'm listening to that thinking how fascinating and how interesting that could be, like at such a young age, to be showing an interest in forensic science and like the crimes that they could resolve in the future, the amazing good that comes from that, and but also just like how fascinating it is, even just if they just enjoy the process of understanding how all that works and learning about it. Like, okay, yeah, bit creepy, bit strange, but they're like that. They like to come up with strange things to learn about. It's fine, it is what it is. But we love watching CSI. It's not like any of us don't enjoy learning about this stuff, is it really? Like, we all love it. But it's interesting how, from my perspective, is that our children should be learning about whatever random thing is curious to them, and that obviously leads to an amazing outcome for them as individuals. So they'll go somewhere interesting with it. But if we've just got this idea that children...
Education is sitting down and doing...
Yeah. Like, this is just what it is, and this is an excellence, and this is what they should be doing, and if you're not doing that, then you're a weirdo or you're whatever.
Yeah.
And I think we've just got such a strange perspective in this country, and in any country really, that are kind of stuck on set goals. We've just kind of been, for want of a better word, brainwashed by experiencing school ourselves, going through the motions of that ourselves, that we have forgotten that we're actually allowed to choose to live our life how we choose to live it. And I mean, even just the idea of having to sit and record all of that information to make sure I've remembered to update it. I mean, you're talking to a fairly large amount of people in the homemade community being neurodivergent. I have ADHD. I am not going to remember to do these things on time, and I'm not going to be, I'm going to be so stressed all the time that have I remembered to update it? Oh my goodness, I completely forgot to change this one 3 weeks ago. They're going to be mad at me. Like, we've got to be, as you say, that walking through our lives and thinking about how these things will affect me, and truthfully, how that, like, look at my life as a different perspective. Like, ask them to look at your life and think, what would it be like if I'm simply a family, got a father who's doing full-time work in a government-related job. He's a good man. He does his job well. I'm an entrepreneur. I pay my taxes. I pay my bills. I own my own home. You know what I mean? I'm just living my life, and I've got 2 children who I want to educate myself and use, and therefore safeguard by checking that they have DBS checks, that they're qualified to do what they're supposed to be doing, that like if I hire people, then I do those checks. You've got the power, as you say. Yes, okay, I prioritize all of my headspace into prioritizing my 2 children, and I understand completely that the government are never going to be able to give each child individual attention in that way. Never, under any circumstances, are they going to have the capacity to do that. And that, yes, they want to make sure that every child is safe, but it's almost like this argument that if they take over all this control, that they will somehow have that ability to keep an eye on every single child and stop every single possible bad thing happening in the world, is just propaganda. There's absolutely no way that will happen. But I ultimately take on the responsibility as a parent of checking that my children are safe in whatever things and endeavours they do, that no child is going to ever be able to receive that much attention in any kind of state-funded thing. So ultimately, it doesn't matter how they want to put it. Most parents home educating their children are safeguarding them better than they would be safeguarded in a school, and will absolutely flag and notice anything that's awry. I talk to my children constantly about consent, about recognising that if anybody ever tried to do anything to them, like, for example, touching them in the places where their swimsuits go, if someone tried to grab them at a park, if someone tried to offer them sweets, like all the different things. I talk to them constantly about stranger danger, about ensuring that they're safe, about telling a trusted adult, even if that isn't me in that situation, even if they don't feel like they can talk to me. I talk to them all the time about trusting other grown-ups, but also being aware that they don't have the right to do X, Y, Z. I mean, I've got an example of my child. I think he was 4. I can't remember. He was only little. We had to go to the doctors because I thought he might have had a urine infection or something. And she wanted to have a look at his at his genital area. I'm trying to think of the word I want to use on a podcast. She wanted to have a look to make sure that he wasn't red or sore. She said, let's have a look, shall we? And just pulled his pants down.
Oh, no.
And he instantly grabbed his pants and went, no, you have to ask. And I was so proud. I literally stood there going, thank you. Yes. Do you reckon maybe we could try with some consent? Like, yes, he's only a child, but you, of all people, as a doctor, need to be emphasising to him the importance of consent-based things happening to his body. And she was horrified. I've never seen a doctor go so red in my life, and was very apologetic and obviously proceeded with his consent in the end. But I was just so proud of him at such a young age for actually standing up for that. And I'm just like, I really want to emphasise how important it is when you're raising children to allow them to have the critical thinking, to question adults, to push back on adults, to ensure their own safeguarding for themselves. And that's not something we're necessarily encouraging in schools. We don't want kids pushing back all the time.
Take school, for example. Consent in school. When now, whatever your view on vaccination, and I don't think I should go into it, some parents do not agree with vaccination. So when vaccinations were offered in school, parents were allowed to opt out their child. What was happening in the schools were taking the children to the side and saying, your parents say that your mother or your father say that you're not on the list to have this, but you are allowed to have it if you want, and this is why you do. And take into account just even something different from that. If your child is in school and a teacher tells them to do something, they don't have a choice. So if that teacher, going back to the data we have for abuse by teachers, if that teacher is abusive, and children in my family have been abused by teachers in school, physically abused and emotionally. So if that teacher is abusive, they have absolute control over that child. That child does not have any right of consent because this person is in power over them, actually has the ability to affect their life. So, of course, it's obvious that a decent parent is going to be a better person at safeguarding. You just care more about the child. And we've got to, you touched on it a minute ago. If you look at, I've seen circulating since yesterday, I've seen online circulation of lists of Labour Party MPs who have used people, committed sexual offences. That's not the point I think we should be making. I think the point is that every single cohort has its bad apples. So you cannot say that you are going to, this bill will save thousands of children from abuse. It's not going to.
No.
It's going to make no difference whatsoever in most cases, because there are MPs who abuse their wives and children or husbands and children. There are government ministers who do so. There are judges who do so. In every walk of life, every cohort of parents includes some who are abusing their children.
Of course.
And that fact will not change with a bill. No. And the other aspect of it is right now, local authorities, including children's social services, have an awful lot of powers that they don't necessarily use well. Children's social, I'm not talking necessarily about education officers. I've been presenting professional development sessions to education officers throughout the country for a couple of years now. And I know that most of them really want to do a good job. Most of them are actually decent human beings. But you've got some who are not, just as you do in every cohort. But you look at children's social services, how many times have children's social services failed children, failed to actually save children, despite being aware of them? Sometimes it's incompetence, sometimes it's lack of resourcing, sometimes just that you simply cannot save every child. So the thing is, the existing legislation gives them the power to act, but they're not doing it. So let's give them more power to act. It's not logical. How can what the problem is is they're not using the regulations and legislation they've got already.
Yeah.
Doing so, we'd be sending more children. But they're not.
Yeah.
And
No.
these are good points to make.
Absolutely. And I think if we're really summarising the concept of sort of just reassurance here, it's just recognising that none of this yet is happening. We're not having to do any of this yet. So please don't worry that you are going to have to suddenly kind of start doing these things. But do definitely find yourself just thinking, okay, what would it be like if I did? And then just sit and having a think about kind of, okay, what do I really want to emphasise to my MP? So like I think you're saying in the message the other day, like be mindful of templates. At the end of the day, your MP is going to be seeing dozens of, like, because as well, some of them I think actually block when they can see that it is literally just a copy and paste template from something, like if they see so many coming through that are all the same. So do send a message that comes from you, your experiences, your worries, your thoughts, your heart. Like, don't talk about the things that your children went through, especially if you've got a story that's like really going to make them stop and go, wow, okay, that's a really good point. Because ultimately we as parents allow far too many kind of, I don't know, oversteps from schools and other kind of areas where we allow them to kind of set rules and set kind of all sorts of different things for us as parents. And those of you who might be listening who are just interested and keen on this because you may be considering home education, you've got children in school right now and you're actually feeling worried about this, please know that we seem to be fighting something like this every couple of years, and we have won on the last occasion, so hopefully we shall do so again. But also recognise that ultimately schools and the various different kind of powers that be around that are already calling the shots in ways that are not appropriate and helpful and safeguarding your children. You are allowed to stand up to it. Like, at the end of the day, these teachers or schools, like, you maybe once had to sit there and just go, yes, miss, no, miss. You do not need to do that anymore. You are a parent. You are responsible for your child's education. You're responsible for their welfare, and taking care of them in general. And so if you do not feel good about something that is happening to them or you or in the school curriculum or anything really, you have got, yes, you are allowed to object. You're allowed to push back. But it's not something we just have to sit up and just put up with.
Sorry to interject there, but
no, it's okay.
Need to talk over you, but I just, something that people don't realise, welfare check. If you're not in school, the school say, we have to make a welfare check. We have to come to your home and check that your child is safe and well. I asked the DfE because I could not find any legal basis for a school making a welfare check. So I asked the DfE to please ask their colleagues what the basis is. Where is the legal basis for a welfare check? They couldn't.
No.
So schools are actually going to parents' homes when their child is off school to check on that child's welfare. Teachers insisting on seeing the child to check that they're safe and well don't have any legal basis to do so. But parents all over the country feel intimidated. Everybody knows that if you go into a schoolroom to talk to a teacher, you feel just like you did when you were a school child. People are intimidated. Don't be. You are the parent.
No.
And that brings us to another point. Actually, as we've been talking, I've thought of some wonderful ways of dealing with this. If every aspect of this bill became law, think of the wonderful things you can do. If every single home educating parent inundates their local authority with every single little change every day they make it.
I know, it does make you laugh, doesn't it? Just the thought of their little brains just being like, I'm going to just get away from me. Not another email.
But that aside, even if every aspect of this came to pass, for most parents, the worst that would happen is they'd have the burden of providing more information. And actually, when we sought legal advice, we were told, well, there's no reason why you should provide that information. Because the only punishment for not doing so is that you'll be served with a notice to satisfy, in which case you simply send information about the education. You don't have to send all of the data that's being requested, because it's not a notice to prove all of that information. It's a notice to satisfy that the education is suitable.
Yeah.
And so
So it actually doesn't even make sense as a process. It's crazy. But I did have a thought as well. He said about welfare checks and them not having the legal grounds to come and do it to us. But if you were to just say, okay, well, I am convinced that my child is not receiving this, that, and the other in school, so I'm just going to come and sit in and just watch his education for a couple of weeks and just wait and watch them say, well, no, you can't come and sit in the classroom. That'd be disruptive. Or like, no, you're not allowed to come in here and tell me what to do. I'm the teacher, or that's undermining me as the teacher, or whatever. It's like, okay, so who's in charge here? Like, who's actually responsible here then? So you're saying to me that like I'm basically beholden to you, that I've got to do everything you say. And so I think when we are dealing with children here who are not happy in school, who are not okay, and we are worrying and we're thinking about home educating, but we're fearful of being kind of having all of this to worry about. And therefore the insinuation that comes with that obviously it is a less than, or it is a fallback option or whatever, which obviously, as we've discussed before, is absolutely not the case, and that home education can be chosen as 100% legally equitable and often, as we've discussed here, a very wonderful way of educating a child, that ultimately you as a parent have the right to push back on this. Just try and remember that all the while we support each other, we recognise how this affects us, and we do push back in whichever way that is. If you have a meeting with your MP, if you send a letter to your MP, if you simply just, when there are any petitions and stuff going around in the near future, sign it. Whatever you feel capable of contributing to it, contribute. Please do not feel pressured or scared and feeling like you have got to do all these things if that's not something that you feel capable of doing. But also don't stress about getting the wording right or whatever else. Just say something, just do something, and every little contribution will add to a message and a vision. And I think whether it's simply you posting something to social media and tagging the Department of Education in about your story, whether it's posting things regularly, whether it's writing a blog, like whatever it is that you feel capable of doing, that puts some information out there into the world about how you're feeling about this and what it actually does to our lived experience. And it might seem crazy to think that sort of a lot of the pushback on this is simply going to be the fact that it's a load of extra paperwork and admin for home educators, and stress and strain of having to prove ourselves is not going to be conducive to most people enjoying it as an option. And we should be allowed to enjoy raising our children and enjoying educating them. We shouldn't feel so beholden to a state kind of curriculum or oversight that we can't actually do what we do best, which is simply to raise our kids and to enjoy doing so. That it shouldn't be getting in the way of that. And I think hopefully with everything that you're doing, everything that everyone who's doing, all the MPs that are fighting for us right now, let's just keep supporting them and trying to convince others, and hopefully we'll get enough people objecting to it in the end or getting the wording right, because I'm sure there are elements of that bill that are good. There must be some bits in there that we do need, or things that do need to change. But the truth of the matter is, when they lump a load of different things together into one thing, they try and squeeze things through, don't they, at the same time? And it's good that obviously people are watching and waiting and paying attention, because otherwise these things would be left unchallenged. So let's make sure we're challenging them and standing up for yourself.
Yeah, sum up on it really is every parent counts. And if you write to your MP and say, don't use a campaign letter, write from the heart. And one thing that parents are worried about is the MP might share their details. The MP, they might forward it to another department. But if you actually specifically say in the letter, please do not share my information, I'm writing to you confidentially, please do not share my information. You can share the but don't share my information. You just make sure that you don't want them to do so. Then they won't share your information. So write to your MP, talk to people. If you've got contacts in the media, then educate them, get them, because if we can get the media on board, understanding how much this undermines parental rights, then that is a huge part of the argument won, because once the media is on board, it whips up the public to be on board. So if you've got if you happen to be somebody who knows a celebrity who would be on board, boy, do they get influence. Often that they shouldn't, but they do. Talk to them, see if you can get them on board.
Yeah.
You know, talk to them, because your circumstances, you as an individual, you are that brick that's going to build this house of trying to
Yeah.
persuade people that actually this isn't all that good. And a bit of reassurance, how good reassurance it is, I don't know. But in my last meeting with the Department for Education, and I have one again tomorrow, I believe, I was raising some of the concerns, and the service lead said, we are aware that there are some difficulties with the bill, and we are talking to our legal team about amendments that could be made. So the DFE they're not deaf to parent concerns. No, that they are not going to change everything. They're not going to delete it, for example. But they've got to do what their masters in government say. But they do have a lot of influence, and they are aware of our concerns. So we do know that. But please, whatever your bit is, just do your bit. Don't panic. For most of you out there, this is not going to cause you harm. It's just going to cause you annoyance. And even annoyance you could have great fun with by just, as we said, inundate your local authority with so much information that the whole system breaks. So in the worst, we've got that.
Yeah, that's the thing. That the truth of the matter is, no local authority is going to be able to take the weight of receiving that much data and processing it and updating it on any kind of system themselves. So it's short-sighted, and it's something which I think they just don't quite grasp the concepts themselves. Like the people who have written it in the first place just do not seem to understand the magnitude of some of those sort of sections. And so I think if we can help to explain it to them from a real experience, like what that would actually look like, then it will make them stop and think and go, okay, that's not going to work. Clearly that makes no sense. There's no point in us having the legal right to have this information if we can't actually monitor it or do anything with it, because there's no way we can all input it ever. Like, it's never going to work. So I think they're hopefully going to start to recognize that actually it wouldn't be like, there's so many different conversations we could go on this one. I won't go off into another tangent, but there's a lot to think about. But there's just pick a point, any point you like, that you've read something and it sparked a thought with you, and it's made you think there's something I could say on this, and just talk about that if necessary. You don't have to cover off the whole bill. You don't have to understand the whole thing, but just if there's something which resonates with you, then speak to them about it. But as I say, just talk from the heart, talk about what your experience is, and hopefully it will help them to understand that there are real people out here living a life, and that like I saw a phrase that the MPs are using, like we're using a hammer to crack a nut, that they're trying to take too much power and seize too much control to solve something which, truthfully, let's be honest, is to some degree unsolvable. That you can't keep an eye on every single person every single day and know everything they're doing. And so, of course, things happen and stuff does slip through the cracks. And sadly, that will mean that children will get hurt. And we have got to work very hard to try and protect each other, protect our children, teach each other to be kind. It's a big part of as a community. It's always going to be a part of a community of humans, unfortunately, but we can support each other with that. And I think that ultimately the government needs to start thinking about how they can work with us and those of us who care and want to do the right thing, rather than kind of trying to ever build control over those people. Instead, I think they need to start recognizing how we all actually want the same thing. We want a good, safe, wonderful community, and we want to raise our children well into that, and that we're not all trying to fight back against them. And so we don't deserve to be put under a thumb and controlled even further. We deserve to live our life and to do what makes sense for us.
Yep, exactly.
But thank you guys for listening. As we said earlier, do make sure that you are following Education Otherwise on their socials, on their Facebook group, find their website, make sure you're reading the blog, keep up to date with what they are putting out there about this. They're running sessions that kind of give you details on how to respond to it, and we might try and come back and do some more podcast episodes on this and get some other thoughts as things develop, so that you guys are kind of kept up to date with it as well. But do make sure that you are just reaching out to someone like Education Otherwise that you trust, that is actually going to provide you with proper information, that is not going to just be whipping you into a frenzy and stressing you out, but people who know what they're talking about and are actually doing the actual fighting right now. They are reading the bill, they are talking to MPs, they're talking to the Department of Education. They are not just blogging online somewhere, they are actually doing something about it. So they are the ones who know what they're talking about. So do make sure you're reaching out to them if you're concerned or you have any thoughts that you need help processing about it all. But yeah, we're all here for you. Those of us who've been in this for a little while now know that this is part and parcel, I think, of being a home educator. You start to really understand how important it is to fight for your rights as a parent and for your children. So embrace that. Feel the empowerment that brings you in knowing that you are doing something that actually works very hard to safeguard your children and their rights for the future too. So it feels pretty good to do it. And I think if you try and let the stress go out of it and start to recognize it's just a good thing that you're pushing back, and this is the point of diplomacy. This is what we're supposed to be doing as humans in a big community like this. So fingers crossed we can fight the good fight. But thank you so much, Wendy, again for coming and chatting to us about it. And
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we'll certainly probably speak again, I'm sure, sooner than we think. But we'll get through the process. I'm sure the next reading will be soon, I suppose, and we'll have more to go from there. So thank you everyone for listening.
The bill, so that people know, the bill goes next to committee in the House of Commons. It then comes back for the final reading with amendments. It then goes off to the House of Lords, and it goes through the same process again in the House of Lords. And we have got quite a few peers on side in the House of Lords. So even Mike's story, the peer who brought some of the previous bills forward, feels that it lacks support. I know that he would be supportive, for example, of providing access to examinations, because despite him disagreeing with us, he doesn't really actually care that children have that access. So even who you felt might not be on our side can be to a degree. So thank you ever so much for having me. And
that's all right. You're very welcome.
Everybody listening.
Thank you, guys. Take care.